Hello, everybody. Namaskar. Today we have a book discussion on an interesting topic, Maker of Modern Dalit History by two young, prolific, I would say very young but prolific writers, activist Sudarshan Raman and Guru Prakash Paswan. Uh, and we have three eminent panelists. They will discuss about the books, and it's sort of in a more in a objective fashion, so that we need to take this further and generate a kind of interest among larger public. So before we start, I would request Karan to put up the video on this subject, please. Thank you. Uh, so this book, which in a way is basically documenting many of the illustrious Dalit writer, activist, and and legends. I mean, they have been actually, unfortunately, very badly excluded in our history. Our writing of history in India. Unfortunately, not only about Dalit, many have been actually omitted in the process of writing. So in a sense, this is a brave attempt to document many of those unsung heroes, heroines, and those people who have made seminal contribution to with all the challenging condition, with all kind of exclusionary barriers, and then societal sort of onslaught against them. And the best part about this book, which the discussion would obviously take us that too. So I don't want to actually steal the thunder at this moment, but I would say, I mean, having received the copy and read this book, wonderful book, I must say that the best part of this book is the treatment of of women, especially because many of the you have seen from Ambedkar, so many of those Dalit legends. I think many of them have become cult figures, but you hardly actually probably hear about a women activist or women Dalit writer, those who have made also phenomenal contribution. Some of us probably know about only a handful of them, but I think many of those lesser known, Ayan Kali, Soyarabai, and Rani Jhalkaribai, that story I actually literally, I mean, I really enjoyed, because we have seen actually the movie Rani Lakshmi Bai, and the legend and the kind of things it did, and the way she fought, but hardly anybody knows actually her ableist lieutenant was a Dalit woman, and she fought, and she was her most trusted lieutenant. So this sort of a story which they have picked up, and they put very painstaking work, because I know you don't have actually sort of documentation, you don't have much facts actually. I mean, these are like, almost like oral history, listening from somebody, and it's passing from generation after generation. That has been, painstakingly documented. There will be, obviously, people make challenge that, contest that source of faith, but I think a beginning has been made, and in that sense this is a good contribution, which I am sure that it is going to trigger, it has already triggered a sort of brainstorming, and it is going to probably generate interest among new generation of writers and historians, and budding academician who want to chart a path and bring many of those cases to the public knowledge. And this is where I think this book's attempt, which I think has succeeded in generating the interest, the kind of interest that it deserves, because what we actually been seeing, kind of treatment to history in the last 60, 70 years in this country. In some way or other, both these young writers have actually made an humble attempt to at least uh, create a kind of create a path in which there could be a plurality of sort of opinion and plurality of efforts. It should not be just my way or highway kind of history that has been written. This is the only way to understand history. There is no finality in social science and humanities, and it's all open. I mean, there could be always contestation. So in that sense, I would say this book is a brave attempt, and I'm sure our panelists would actually take us and enlighten us much more. And the audience, of course, we expect them to also raise sort of tough questions to our writers and panelists, so that we have a fruitful evening, and this book can actually go to many places, and many people should actually read and benefit, and it should create a discussion. That's the main effort. It should create a discourse and debate, whether you agree or disagree. That's not the issue is what they have made, what they have contributed. Let it be questioned, let it be challenged, let it be contested. That's how actually we should judge the past contribution, because there is no definite answer to. There could be many narrative on a single same sort of particular event or a personality, like the way Ambedkar has been interpreted by various ways, the way Gandhi has been interpreted, the way Nehru has been interpreted. So it is with almost every personality. uh, so with this, I now would first I'll invite two authors to say a brief, maybe 7-8 minutes each, actually, to elaborate what actually like made them to get into this venture, and and write and come out with this contribution, and then why they actually choose this particular kind of personalities, because there are wide gamut of you can actually name, there could be I can easily name another 10 probably Dalit activists and intellectuals who have made also seminal contributions. So why is their omissions? That question obviously would come, but they are the best person to tell us that. So first I'll invite Sudarshan Raman Brother, and Sudarshan doesn't actually require introduction. He's such a kind, prolific columnist and writer, and he's been working in diverse capacities. Like he has been part of India Foundation and headed their Center for Public Diplomacy. He has been the founder of Young Thinkers Forum in Chennai, and he's very active there. And then he was also legislative fellow to the Washington DC State Department, and he's a kind of a thought leader, and I would say that without any hesitation that they're the future of this country, and they're the future leader of this country, and they would take us forward, make this country more inclusive. So Sudarshan, your turn first.
Thank you so much, Niranjan, for this opportunity. Thanks to you, thanks to ORF, and to your able team for putting this discussion together. Uh, they say stories are powerful and can unite. So, in Makers of Modern Dalit History, what my good friend and brother Guru and me have focused on is stories of incredible Indians who overcame adversity to create their own unique identity. Yes, Incredible Indians. Through this volume, we want to shift the focus from Incredible India to Incredible Indians. The stories of the Incredible Indians covered in the book are remarkable. You did give a brief introduction of the book, but I'll dwell a little deep. The book is divided into three parts. One is the introduction. The second is the profiles of these incredible Indians. And the third is the conclusion. The introduction lays out the outline of Dalit literature, its genesis, our Dalit brethren's quest for social democracy, and how Dalit assertion ought to lead to representation in key fields and dignity. The profiles of the 18 personalities of whom we have covered, they cater to early years, breakout period, that is how they broke out into their specific fields and the impact they had in their times that can shape the thinking of today. The conclusion, interestingly, focuses on contemporary personalities of today. We have Swati ma'am with us. We have focused one such personality we have focused on in the conclusion is Meera ma'am, her mother, who's the daughter of late Babu Jagjivan Ram. These are some of the personalities in the conclusion. They've been inspired by some of the personalities we have written about. Let us say a Dr. Sanjay Paswan, who's inspired by a Kabir Das. Meera ma'am, Meera Kumar ma'am, daughter of Babu Jagjivan Ram. We have written about Radhika Gill, who comes from the Valmiki community, inspired by sage Valmiki. So, in the conclusion, we have focused on how they carry forward the vision of representation and dignity through the medium of artificial intelligence, information technology, education, and jobs. Now, to your important question, why Dalit history? Why did we choose this subject? Both Guru and I started writing columns together in 2016. In fact, our first column on Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was written on April 14th, 2016. It is then we realized that we must consciously make an attempt to write about Dalit icons, especially when their respective birth anniversary or death anniversary was marked. It is slowly from there towards 2017 was when the idea of a book germinated. We really want common minds to identify with the Dalit icons. In an ideal scenario, we would like all of them to become subjects of study. Be it the first war of Indian independence in 1857, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Indian freedom movement, the making of our constitution, the Bhakti movement, the Indian Foreign Service, you name it. The contribution of Dalits is discernible and noteworthy. Just 10 days back, on June 18th, the nation marked Ayyan Kali's death anniversary. In fact, you'll be surprised and amazed to know there was absolutely minimal conversation on him in social media or mainstream media. He foreshadowed much of what Dr. Ambedkar stood for, be it representation of Dalit in key areas, assertion through arts, or women-led empowerment. Yet today, he's hardly remembered. Hence, our attempt through makers of modern Dalit history is to ask 21st century historians why such important personalities have not been given their due. India has so much to learn from them. We want to remember and pay homage to them. In fact, we want to bring out that to the reader that some of the most unthinkable and unexpected atrocities that were heaped on them, yet they succeeded in establishing equality, integration, and cohesion in the society. We have tried to capture important moments in the lives of these personalities and enable this book to be a positive intervention only. The book is a journey of our friendship between Guru and me. We have had a number of conversations centering social justice, social reform, Dalit identity, importance of affirmative actions like reservation, so on and so forth. This has actually shaped the book to come along. Ours is just a humble addition, Niranjan, and the Dalit discourse today is ever evolving and the social justice movement. We did not have a list in mind when we began writing. We only felt a wide variety of fields needs to be represented to showcase the tremendous impact they had. We also wanted to bring out personalities from diverse regions. Look at Ayan Kali from Kerala. We look at Jogendranath Mandal from a West Bengal. We look at Uddam Singh from a North India, so on and so forth. So, hence, our attempt is to showcase how these personalities looked at spirituality, literature, politics, freedom movement, economic development, etc., as instruments of social empowerment. We want this book to inspire every Indian. We want every Indian to be connected with them, because these are the kind of stories, like I said, stories unite people, and we must continue to share them with the world. I'll stop here because we have a very, very distinguished panel. This panel we have learned from so much. In fact, we're just recounting Guru and me this morning. When we started the book, we visited Swati ma'am first, and she just told us in one line, guys, go ahead and write it. I remember when she encouraged us, we were starting off, we didn't know what the future held for us. Lalita ma'am and Professor Rao, who's such a distinguished presence in this field, continues to guide us. Even till this day, he's here. Lalita ma'am has also seen it from a southern India perspective, continues to observe this issue. So we have a distinguished panel. We'd like to hear from them of what they think of the book.
Thank you, Sudarshan, and very succinctly you put, actually, I mean, in just 5 minutes, and so many things actually you said, and truly this looks like a journey of friendship. I mean the kind of lively conversation that you have put, and in such a nice, I would say, very easy language, that any lay person can understand. It's not a heavy kind of academic language of history that dissuades the reader. So I think that's the best part of the book. Now, Guru, your turn to. I think you don't require introduction, being the youngest face of BJP and being the national spokesperson. So I don't want to waste time actually in introducing you, but I think being also the faculty in Patna University and that too in law, I think you understand the affirmative action, the entire gamut of reservation and it's sort of linkages with this sort of story that you have presented. So I think please give us a brief about the motivation about this book and what made you to actually attempt make a very courageous attempt like this.
Thank you so much, Niranjan ji. It's an absolute honor to be at this platform of Observer Research Foundation. It is, as we all know, as we all are aware of, that it's one of the most creditable, established think tanks, not only in India, not only in South Asia, but in the world today. We have seen ORF extending to Washington, D.C., and so on, and working on multiple areas. Not only security, strategy, social policies, but now obviously with time ORF is also evolving, and such sort of brainstorming happening on ORF, it's a huge boost to both of us, both me and Sudarshan. We are also truly honored to have the three pillars of support. Pillars of support, I say, because I have personally taken inspiration from all three of them. Swati ji, like Sudarshan also said, that from the very beginning, from the very outset, because Babu Jagjivan Ram remains one of the most important and remarkable figures of Dalit history, modern Dalit history, and Dalit politics as well. Lalita ji, obviously, me and Lalita ji, we have worked on multiple projects on Dalit women as well, and how to have a regular routine forum to have issues and deliberations specifically regarding to Dalit women, their representation, their issues, their concerns, and their challenges. And obviously, Professor Chinna Rao has been a personal inspiration in the sense that he is one of the pioneers of Dalit history in the Indian academia. So this term, this word Dalit history, has come into the academic discourse thanks to the contributions of Professor Chinna Rao, who believes in silently working, and the sort of body of work that has created, it is going to guide the generations to come. Like I said, Babu Jagjivan Ram, for that matter, a lot of us might not be aware of this fact that Babu Jagjivan Ram remains one of the longest serving parliamentarians, not only in India, but globally. His name is registered in the Limca Book of World Records. He has never lost an election. Can you imagine? The man, the colossus, never losing an election throughout in his political career and 45 years of parliamentary life. In a stretch of 45 years, anyone who has any remote idea of Indian politics can tell you how difficult it is to get re-elected. So getting elected continuously for the stretch of 45 years, it's commendable. This is one such facet of his personality as a defense minister. And this is not what we are saying. This is not what we are saying because we have worked on him. Gary Bass, who has written this book called The Blood Telegram, which is based on the 1971 war that led to the emergence of Bangladesh. So 1971 war was also an important event in the history of modern India. Unfortunately, the credit is not given to him. And that's really unfortunate. The credit goes to the Prime Minister. Obviously, Prime Minister had a leadership, had a role to play, but as a defense minister, he played a stellar role. And this has been noted by Gary Bass in his book, The Blood Telegram, which is based on the correspondence which is happening between the US government and the US embassy in Dhaka. So that's a sort of man he is, that he is the most hawkish defense minister. Someone like Henry Kissinger has also made outstanding remarks on the contributions of Babu Jagjivan Ram. So we realize that in the course of the last 7 decades, although as emerging scholars, like Niranjan ji also said, I'm an assistant professor, just started in this academic life. We have no authority to comment upon the intent of the historians or with what sort of agenda or propaganda they were driven, that these icons were not remembered, these icons were not paid the homage they deserved. But as a nascent academic, I think it's very important for us to have a sustained effort to acknowledge these icons. So Babu Jagjivan Ram definitely has been a lasting impact on both me and Sudarshan. And we started, like Sudarshan also said, that Sudarshan comes from Tamil Nadu. His traditional milieu is diametrically opposite from my traditional milieu. So it's it's very different. And the sort of heated conversations we were having at the start of our friendship on, let's say, reservation. So reservation is one of the most polarizing issues, one of the most contested issues of our times. So Sudarshan was purely anti-reservation. I obviously, as a product, as a second generation beneficiary of affirmative action, I'm a supporter of reservation. Obviously, that is a matter of different debate on what sort of pluses or minuses or how can we make it more contemporaneous. That is a different matter, but that started with a debate and a constructive debate, a solution-oriented debate. And like Sudarshan said, that it started with our article on Baba Saheb Ambedkar. One more thing, with all due respect to Baba Saheb, a lot of focus has been given to Baba Saheb, but at the same time, there are many more personalities. There are many more personalities who've made lasting impact on the Dalit psyche, on the Dalit imagination. They must be given recognition. Jogendranath Mandal. So Jogendranath Mandal was the first law minister of East Pakistan. And it was due to his contribution, he vacated the seat for Baba Saheb Ambedkar so that Baba Saheb Ambedkar can be a part of the first Lok Sabha. And then henceforth the law minister and the of the Indian constitution. So that is something very crucial. There are many such icons. The political icons of Jogendranath Mandal, Kanshi Ram for that matter, Kanshi Ram comment, and there is a context, there is a background in which his movement emerges. So, and like Sudarshan also said, that we have made an effort that gender representation and regional relation is also being taken care of. We have been very careful in our approach. Obviously, our as two individuals, our resources were limited, our times were limited. So obviously there can be some deficiency And upon critical academic examination, you can say that you might have left someone, you might have left from there. So, in fact, only a couple of days ago, the Hindu magazine did a one-page illustrative story on Rani Rashmoni. So, Rani Rashmoni is a subaltern Rani from the banks of Hooghly River in Kolkata, who played a very phenomenal role in labor empowerment of the region and the fisheries community, so that the fisheries community get the right to fish in the Hooghly River. So there are many stars, Rani Jhalkaribai, and we intend to, once things normalizes, wave settles down, we intend to do a nationwide tour and sort of meet the living members. We got in touch with the great grandson of Sardar Udham Singh. So a lot of us are not aware of the social background of Sardar Udham Singh. And Sardar Udham Singh, look at the vision of the man, look at the courage. So he sees Jallianwala Bagh massacre happening in front of his eyes, and he makes it a point that I'm going to take revenge of these institutional killings, of these lynching. The man goes to London. The man is a part of Gadar movement, coming from such a background. So in a sense, we are also trying to suggest that the Dalit imagination, the Dalit history is not entirely premised on victimhood, because obviously there are a lot of literature, and obviously being a victim has been a part of it, but there is also a part of perspective where they have made the supreme sacrifices for our culture. They have made the supreme sacrifices for the sake of our civilization and nation. And why not highlight this contribution? So I think it's an academic attempt. Obviously, in Eastern UP, there was Raja Suhel Dev, then Raja Salhesh. So it's very important for us to sort of commemorate them in our whatever little wisdom we have, whatever little resources we have. We must remember, and I think this book is an effort in that direction. It is a collective effort of each one who is present in the panel. This played a very decisive and a very fundamental role in guiding us, in hand-holding us. And obviously, like I said, Rani Rashmoni Devi, in the future as well, we intend to identify such icons and create more scholarship and research around these icons. Niranjanji.
Thank you. I think very nicely put, and the manner in which you presented this thing with those examples of Babu Jagjivan Ram, and the way you actually traverse to other personalities, I think that's a skill. So I think you're mastered, and it's a very interesting way of telling to the audience. Now, getting back to the the discussion part, we would like to start with Lalita ji first, but I see she is struggling with her connection. So, Lalita ji, can you hear us? Are you able to hear us? I think. Are you able to hear us? Or if your internet is not, I think you can actually probably switch up your video and you can speak. Because she's struggling with her connection.
I think we can request her to we can request someone else to speak now, Niranjanji.
Yeah, that is what we'll do. I think so. I'll now request Professor Rao to actually begin. And Professor Chinna Rao is a well-known academician whose work actually stretch on a gamut of issues covering Dalit emancipation, Dalit history, and then reservation affirmative action. And he currently is a professor with Center for the Study and of Discrimination and Exclusion in School of Social Science, JNU. And his PhD was on Dalit movement in Andhra Pradesh. And I happened to read some of his writing when I was actually doing a book on reservation some 10 years ago. And I've benefited. I've been tracking his publications, and he has also hold a number of positions. As one of the significant position was member secretary of Indian Council for Historical Research at a very young age, and he was also visiting fellow to Charles Wallace Trust and several other distinctions. So I'll request Professor Rao to take us a sort of maybe 8 to 10 minutes tour of the book and what he finds unique about this contribution, and which way it adds actually to the kind of absence, or I would say deficiency, that we see among the sort of hard work on the Dalit history, and what kind of intellectual contribution it makes this volume, and I would request him to be as objective as possible. Your time.
Thank you so much for your generous introduction, and namaskar and good afternoon to you all, and to the honorable co-panelists and the young authors. At the very outset, I thank the organizers for extending the invitation to be a part of this panel. Look, as a student of history, as a trained historian, how do we look at Dalit history? For that matter, Dalit studies. For the American phrase, tell it like it was. Although it's echoing, no doubt, consciously or unconsciously, Leopold Ranke, famous injunction to write history as it really was. Evidently, this is neither easy or simple, nor as it sounds, particularly in the case of India's untouchable past. The actual past, its recovery, our quest to approximation to the actual history are complex and difficult questions. Though it needs to be noted that the recent advances in retrieving histories of untouchables has gained recognizable significance. History in the post-colonial societies assumes a crucial role, not only retrieval of the past, but also constructing identities. Historical enterprise in India encapsulates this crisis into selective appropriation of the past. The Dalits, also known as outcasts, harijans, depressed classes, untouchables, and scheduled castes, and so on, constitute an excluded community by not including, and references to discrimination abound in historical narratives. Yet, the current historiographical trends as regards to the outcast past are ambiguous and elusive in nature. The earlier dominant and conventional histories, both from within liberal and Marxist framework, in the sense, converged in casting several discursive trends and perceptible historical narratives that range from negative representation to positive reconstructions of their histories. Often, the Dalit acts of these outcasts are dubbed as parochial elements, pro-colonial, or even anti-national nature, and concern for them was mundane. For instance, censorious references to them appear in a nationalist historiography, nationalist school of thought in the historical knowledge is what we talk about in the subject of history. This narrative does not recognize non-elite, non-Brahmin contribution towards the national movement. Similarly, the Cambridge historiography, though it contests on the ideological basis of the nationalist narrative, does not initiate a dialogue with the social periphery and projects these lower castes as mere passive followers of the elite leaders. Marxist historians, too, working within the rigid class perspective, show reluctance to address the issues related to caste. And finally, in the historical thought, this is subaltern school of thought that emerged in 1980s, despite postulating an alternative framework, suffering from the same limitation as they too failed to raise fundamental issues related to the outcast historical experience. The historical enterprise in India encapsulates this crisis in the selective appropriation of the past. The outcasts are one such people neglected in history, and the invisibility of outcasts illustrates the crisis of Indian historiography. Across the world, it's not only in India, the voices of these marginalized communities categories were excluded from history during the 70s. The history as a scientific discipline claims to have valid knowledge of the past, but its bias towards the question of exclusion of specific groups rendered it as historyless and its usefulness as a social body of knowledge that is extremely elitist and strongly critiqued. A group of radical Puerto Rican historians in early 1970s stated that, I quote, "We face the problem that history presented as ours is only part of our history. What is the history of the historyless? The anonymous people who, in their collective acts, their work, daily lives, and fellowship have forged our society throughout centuries." Similarly, the Dar es Salaam School of History expressed its dissatisfaction, saying that we would end with a singularly useless history celebrating individuals, narrating their biographies and heroic acts, at the most erecting monuments for valiant tribes. These would leave the large mass of our people out of history, and that too without a history. Here is the book which answers all these questions to represent the historyless people or the so-called marginalized groups, because it's the the authors mentioned that it's incredible Indians, and also advised that 21st century historians should work on these themes. The I do not know the kind of, it's a brilliant attempt, I must say. I should congratulate both the authors of they call it subaltern history, but whereas the subaltern school may not include you, because in their subaltern, there is the subaltern school of history that emerged in South Asia. They brought out 11, or at least volumes of subaltern history, volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3, and so on and so forth. At least in the beginning of the 9 volumes, from 1 to 9, not even a single essay on Dalits, it included the subaltern history in their so-called subaltern studies. So they may not agree with you. If you call it yours is a subaltern history, they call it theirs is a subaltern history. And the finally, to count, as a student of history, once again I repeat, the chronicalization and the periodization and the title justification, with all positive engagement, the title calls the makers of modern Dalit history. So I do not know what is their periodization of modern Dalit history, because, for example, fine, out of these 18 great personalities that they provided us in the volume, some of them, let's say Ravidas, 15th and 16th century, Kabir Das, a 15th century, Nandanar, a 12th century man, and beyond that you have Valmiki and Vedavyasa. So if you want to put them into modern India or modern Dalit history, I do not know how do we justify the title as a student of history. And I must congratulate very less known personalities also were included. For example, Soyarabai. We only talk about Chokomela, but nobody heard about his wife who made a brilliant contribution. And I must congratulate. And it's a brilliant attempt, I must say, as a student of history. And when will it be a part of a discussion or a part of the curriculum unless and until the state intervenes through a curriculum that needs that these Dalit studies, Dalit icons to be a part of their curriculum, and where they, unless it is a systemic compulsion for the students to read, they will not read, because they don't want the Dalit history, they don't want the marginalized history. For example, unless and until if the mainstreams are studying the marginal histories, why do we need the specialized centers like the center the department that I am working on? It studies the social exclusion and inclusive policies. Because why is this gender studies that came in? Because the mainstream subjects are not studying enough. That's where the gender studies came in. And at one point of time, UGC used to have National Epoch Thinkers chairs. I think if the UGC needs to revive these epoch-making thinkers, including Babu Jagjivan Ram chairs or Phule chairs, etc. I had been part of in one of those chairs at University of Calcutta. It's almost like 5 years now. Babu Jagjivan Ram chair, no appointment was being made. It was just allotted the chair and it remains there. So there no intellectual, engagement there. So many of these things were neither the schemes are there, neither the schemes are not available. If the schemes are available, it's not implementable. So, and congratulations both the authors, and it's a brilliant attempt. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. I think you've put it so straightforward, and also the way you began and connecting with this work. The larger sort of picture, what we see globally. The way history has been treated, and the kind of exclusionary treatment that in time to time matters. So at least in that sense, one can debate about whether it is actually appropriate to use the word modern or not. That's another debate definitely. But I think you've raised some of those as a typical academic and someone who been researching on this domain. So I think this sort of suggestion would go a long way to help, and because this is just a beginning and they want to actually have a journey further and take it forward. So I think this would come very handy. Now I see Lalita ji has able to reconnect. Yeah, thank. It's such a difficult time sometimes. Actually, all of us face this situation. No, there is nothing in your hand. Actually, most of us face this sort of situation. So now, without waiting, I'll allow before your connection probably goes down again. So Lalita ji, now I think it's your turn, and you also it's such a eminent person. In India, who headed National Commission for Women and been walking through women empowerment, and of those women, especially from the vulnerable and underprivileged sections, and your extensive work on range of work on HIV/AIDS, and providing support to sex workers, LGBT, and those community. You have done pioneering work, and we want to also see your perspective. How do you see this book and this contribution, and which way it actually adds or which way it misses, and where else actually it also need to move forward, how it can also move forward, because this is probably the starting point. Now I would request you to give us a sort of your sense of this thing, thought about this book.
Thank you for the opportunity, to be able to discuss this book. One of the reasons why I really like this book, and I read it through at one setting. When I was young, I was a bookworm, so I could read through big tomes at one go. But as I grew older, I'm not as patient. But this book really fascinated me. I liked it not only because of the number of women who have been portrayed as victors, not as victims, but also for the fact that it actually humanizes the people that we are talking about. Now, all of these are extraordinary achievers, people who have risen to heights that, against enormous amounts of adversity. And all of these are stories of success and victory and defeating the hardships that face them. We know that Dalits in India have always been, marginalized. And I actually don't even like the word, the description of a community by calling them Dalits or scheduled caste or any of that. Now, I come from a family where caste was never a problem. My father used to write non-NA, in the little column in my school diary where it said caste. And I had no idea what caste I was till my daughters grew up and they had to give their school finals. And I was told that you have to give a caste certificate. So I went along to the, Tahsildar, who said, but we know your family, you're OBC. And I was quite astounded because I never looked at myself as an OBC at all. I don't think I come across as BC at all. So I don't really believe in these classifications. But I was really struck by not only the humanizing of these wonderful people, but also by the contemporizing. We are going through very, very tough times at the moment. The whole country is, the whole world is. And to be presented a book where we talk about people, ordinary people from very ordinary backgrounds. I won't say marginalized, though they were from very difficult backgrounds. who used their own resources, that is, in the sense, their own individual character, their own strength, their own perseverance, their own resilience, their own, let's say, stubborn will to, to change what they thought was wrong, is a remarkably uplifting stories that we could read for everybody. Almost all of us have faced difficulties in our life. And when we come across a book written with so much empathy, I really thought that it makes not only good, but actually pretty easy reading. One originally would have thought that when you're talking about people who have made a success of their lives despite the amount of problems they had to face, the hardships they had to overcome, it won't be very interesting. But contrary to my expectation, it is an absorbing book. One of the first people I read about is Babu Jagjivan Ram. When I was a child, my father was a central cabinet minister in the same cabinet in which Babu Jagjivan Ram was there, Indira Gandhi's cabinet, from 71 to 73. My father died in an air crash in 73. But ironically, we used to live next door to each other. In those days, that road, Krishnamaya Marg, was called Hastings Road. We lived in number 8, Babuji lived in number 6. And in those days, you didn't have walls between the houses. You had these shrubs. Now, our family always had, we had 4 dogs. And Babuji used to have cattle and chickens and all that in his farm, and in the grounds of his house, like huge grounds. If you've ever seen them, you'll know. And our dogs used to go, especially one of them used to happily slip through the fence. And there used to be huge fights between the servants. One day, my father came home from one of his cabinet meetings and he was talking to my mother. I was very young. I didn't understand the importance of what he was saying. But he said, despite everything people may say about Jagjivan Ram, he's a remarkable man. My father was responsible for the nationalization of coal mines. And as you know, miners are an extraordinarily rich, powerful, very, very strong lobby. Even today, much more so in those days. Most of the labor in those mines come from the Dalit community. And when my father first brought up the idea of nationalization of coal mines, there was a great deal of fear amongst the cabinet members. And one of the main objections raised was there would be riots. And Appa came home and said, but I was totally surprised. Our neighbor, this gentleman, just looked at me very calmly and said, Mohanji, if you want to go ahead with this, I will stand by you. These are my people who are dying in those mines. These are my people who have no safety, who risk their lives every day, who remain so poor that often their families don't go to school. Most of them don't go to school. They have nothing to look forward to in life, but they still toil and struggle every day. I promise you that I will see that there are no riots. If that is the objection being raised, it's no objection at all. Go ahead and do what you need to do. My father said I was absolutely astounded by the man's sense of not only unity, but sense of desire to actually do something, bring about a change that would help his community. So I don't know, if most people know, but probably most people don't, because those were much smaller cabinets and all cabinet meetings are closed. But Babu Jagjivan Ram, like many of the others, K.R. Narayanan, for example, I met him when he had come to the hospital when my brother, who was also subsequently at that point of time a cabinet minister in Atalji's cabinet, and he was dying. He was in AIMS on the ventilator, and Narayanan's elder daughter, who was a foreign service officer, was a good friend of my brother's. So he had come to talk to us. What a lovely man he was. It was not just about the fact that he held that very high post, but what a humane and what a generous and kind man he was. These are things that we don't think of when we see or meet people who are at a particular level in life or a particular height in society. And this book brings forward not only the struggles they face, and like I said, their personal characteristics of perseverance, resilience, strength, all of that, but also the fact that we have these remarkable people from a community that is normally just written off, even today, unfortunately, very, very unfortunately, even today, just written off. The fact that there are many, many people, and they're like every other human being, some brilliant people from every community are there. But the fact that this community, and there were so many subdivisions, I think, even within that community, and they are described by different names given like chamars, etc., etc., which are very, according to me, very, very disgusting descriptions of entire communities. The fact that we have these absolutely wonderful, remarkable, I'll run off the words when I describe them, people whose lives are there as examples, as I think I wouldn't be exaggerating when I say inspirations, is one of the nicest things I like about these books. Most people think that I was born into privilege. I was, but I've had a tough life. For many years, I've been a single mother, and a single woman in India, especially my generation, doesn't exactly face a very easy time, which is why I've always worked with women. And the number of women that I have worked with from the Dalit community, sorry, when we tried to form self-help groups, which is 30 years ago in the South, self-help groups in the North are only now sort of picking up, but in the South, it's a much older movement. When I worked with sex workers, when I was doing HIV/AIDS prevention work, when I worked with transgenders, other members of the LGBTQ community, many of whom came from what today are given the umbrella term the Dalit communities, they were such wonderful people. Sometimes I found in them more empathy, more humanity, more goodness than I found in many other people from much higher classes or echelons of society or caste, for example. As I said earlier, I don't believe in the caste system. So I never found that to be a barrier for me. For me, it was always about humans, about people, the personal rapport that we're able to form with people. And this book has been remarkably good in reminding me, because, after working in the NCW and being in politics for about now 20 years, sometimes you tend to overlook the fact that even today there is so much discrimination, there's so much exclusion. And it's not all only about women, it's about exclusion that somehow the other, those who have power, they'd like to retain it. And in a very, according to me, sometimes often in an obscene way, they use exclusionary tactics and in language, in behavior, in many other ways, as you know, to keep other people down. And this book has shown that if there is a will, there is a way. I would like to congratulate both Sudarshan and Guru, and I've worked with them in India Foundation for a few years now, for the fact that they have actually written a book which is quite different from others. I feel that it's very, very important that this book is widely discussed, and we urge a lot of youngsters to read it. Because while all these people may have been drawn from different, through the ages in history, Valmiki, Vedavyas, I'm also impressed by the fact that we have 5 women, I think, and about 11 or 12 men. So that it's not just about caste, it's also about the fact that regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, if you really want to, and if you have the will, and it's been done by so many different ways. Some have done it quietly, some have done it in a very activist sort of way, what we call activism today. Some have done it through poetry, some have done it through education and sheer erudition and intellectual quality. Some have done it through absolute devotion to the country, like, of course, our most famous Dalit icon and son, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Some people who have forgotten, like Valmiki, most people don't even know that the man who actually wrote Ramayana as we know it today was a Dalit. And this is something that I think Indians should know. It made me feel very proud about the fact that we have Indians like this throughout history. We have had it. It's not just that they've talked about contemporary people in society today who come from that community. It's about people who through the ages, India has given so many, as a democracy, as a culture, as an ethos. India has given so many people who were excluded the opportunity to rise, to use their own internal and personal struggles and their qualities and their strengths to, to live through the ages in a way. And I really think that this was a book that was written just in time. We are going through, in many ways, many churnings in this country. And the vast majority of people in this country still who are underprivileged come from communities like the Dalits. And we need to offer them inspiration, youngsters, children. So I hope that this book, I actually hope that I wish it could be translated into some of the vernacular languages where we could actually distribute it in colleges and schools, etc., and people could take it from the libraries and read them. I was thinking I would suggest it to Guru and, and to Sudarshan. Of course, it may cost a little money, but I hope the publishers would help them, and maybe even institutions like yours. So, well, all in all, I'm very happy that I was given the opportunity to read the book. I didn't expect it to be so absorbing for me, and I'm not somebody who praises others very easily. I'm too blunt, too forthright, but I did find this book an excellent book, not just to read, but also to learn from. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that I hope that you understand why I wanted actually to say thank you to all to be given this chance to describe something that I really found fascinating. Thank you.
I would request Swati ji. Swati ji is Vice President of Babu Jagjivan Ram National Foundation, and she is actually doing a lot of work actually to strengthen the work of Babu Jagjivan Ram, and she's also simultaneously working as an international development consultant, and she's been a prolific speaker. So, I'll ask you to take this journey. About the book and your impression and what actually, kind of contribution this volume makes, and where do you think actually it can actually make even take it things, conversation about Dalit history and many of those unsung hero forward. So I think once you finish, then we'll bring Lalita ji back. Yeah.
Although I can see Lalita ji and maybe her connection is fine now. Lalita ji, can you hear us? Okay, I'll start.
Yeah.
Thank you, Niranjan ji, for the introduction. To start with, I would like to congratulate Sudarshan and Guru for bringing out this incredibly important and timely book on the Dalit makers of history, and for documenting their invaluable contribution to the making of our country. As they have mentioned, they came to me some while ago and talked about how they would be bringing out this book. And I was actually very excited, and I was all very enthusiastic about it. And I said, you must do it. And I'm so happy the way the book has turned out, and a very big congratulations to both of you. I say this book is timely because we are at a rather critical juncture of Dalit history today. There is this powerful resurgence of Dalit assertion in the country. And the most prominent example of that would be the massive pan-India protests that took place in March 2018 to protest against the dilution of the SC and ST Prevention of Atrocities Act. But behind that protest, it's as if there are 1,000 mutinies taking place every day. Ordinary men and women reclaiming their dignity and their rights. From something as basic to praying in a public temple or riding a horse to one's own wedding, to reaching new heights in industry, bureaucracy, literature, or sports. A new ownership of Dalit identity. Affixing one's caste name, like names which were earlier just completely done away from conversation, like Chamar. Affixing that to your name and wearing it with pride. This is something incredible happening in the country today, and this is actually the right time for us to remember our Dalit icons. And every accomplishment today, big or small, is the culmination of the actions and struggles of the icons mentioned in the book, and many like them. So, when a young student today faces discrimination in school or bullying, student of any caste, they might like to know that Babu Jagjivan Ram faced humiliating discrimination at top academic institutes of his time, and it did not stop him from excelling in his studies. In 1925, when Babuji joined Banaras Hindu University, he met with such humiliating behavior from fellow students that he was forced to leave the hostel and live outside. Later, his experience at Calcutta University was no different. But his reaction was always the same. One, to excel in his studies, and then the second, to organize people, to organize Dalits together and hold massive rallies to protest against this discrimination. In fact, his rallies were so successful that leaders of the time like Subhash Chandra Bose, M.N. Roy, to name a few, took note and praised him. Babuji realized early on in life that education was the most important way to surge ahead. And throughout his life, whether as a minister or otherwise, he built hostels for Dalit students. He provided funds for their education and provided free coaching for Dalit IAS aspirants. In fact, even today, so many years after his demise, I meet people who tell me that their parents or grandparents would not have been able to complete their studies had Babuji not helped them financially. So it's quite incredible. You know, as we have been discussing this and has been mentioned before, history is always written from the point of view of the powerful and the elite. And the subaltern community contributions are just skipped over, or they're not mentioned or ignored, or the meaning of subaltern becomes different for different people, like Professor Rao was saying. But even when they are mentioned, I've noticed that Dalits are often portrayed as victims. But you read this book and you learn their life histories, and you will realize that they were anything but. They were a force to reckon with, each and every character in that book. And they achieved the heights they did because of their sheer brilliance. You know, way back in 1935, when the elections of the Bihar Legislative Assembly were announced, Babuji formed the Bharatiya Depressed Classes, his own organization. It was the oldest and the first Dalit political party to be formed. At the same time, as a Dalit leader, he appeared before the Hammond Commission, which had come from Britain, and demanded that Dalits be given a right to vote in the elections of 1936 and 37. And thereafter, Dalits have been given a right to vote ever since. In the election itself, he was elected unopposed. And not only that, he ensured the victory of 14 of his candidates from the Bharatiya Depressed Classes League. He was just 28 at that time. Forming a government in Bihar at that time would have been impossible without his support. And the Congress therefore naturally invited him to join them. And he did that with 14 of his MLAs. But the British had other plans. They vested all the administrative powers in the governor and formed a puppet ministry there under Premier Yunus. Premier was the lay term used for chief minister in those days. So Premier Yunus tried very hard to win Babuji over and offered him all kinds of, let's say, luxuries to join his government. Babuji listened to his offer and quietly went home. The next morning, Premier Yunus came in his car to pick him up and take him to the assembly as a show of strength. Babuji followed quietly in his own car. At a crossing just before the assembly, he diverted and took another road. So Yunus got down from his car and said, "Ye rasta galat hai." And Babuji replied to him, "Nahi, ye mera rasta hai, aur ye mere liye sahi hai. This is the path I have chosen." And he thus completely thwarted any British attempt for any agenda the British had at that time. This very public rebuke of the British agenda not only gave a momentous thrust to the national movement, the movement for independence at the time, but it just made him a force to reckon with. No party could ignore him after that. He just could not be ignored. He established himself as a leader of note. In fact, Gandhiji himself wrote about this incident and praised him in his journal, Harijan. So at every stage of his life, Babuji grew as a political leader and as a messiah of the downtrodden, and he continued to work for them. After independence, he ensured gates of temples were open for thousands of years. The ones which had been closed to the Dalits were opened. The Jagannath temple in Puri, the Vishwanath Mandir in Banaras, the Meenakshi Mandir in Madurai are a few temples that were personally opened by him on the invitation of the temple trusts. His brilliance as an administrator and a minister are well known and well recorded. And I think I'm reiterating this, but I just want to say it that, as food minister during the severe drought of 1967, he ensured that no one would die of hunger, and he ushered in the Green Revolution. As defense minister, he made two promises to the country. He said the war would not be fought on Indian soil and that any territory we win will not be returned. He went to the front lines himself to motivate the Jawans. And we won a decisive victory in the war, making history and creating new geography. But ironically, despite all these achievements and so many more, which I haven't mentioned, in 1977, even when the majority of MPs wanted him to be Prime Minister, he was denied that position. And it's such a huge loss for the country. I think if he had become Prime Minister then, he would have completely wiped out any form of discrimination from the country forever. So, another reason I think for documenting subaltern history and writing it from the point of view of the marginalized is because the marginalized leaders often take decisions that have far-reaching consequences, which are very unique, which no one else would have thought so in their place. So I'll give you an example. When Babuji was made railway minister in 1956, he of course introduced a slew of laws to increase the efficiency and efficacy of the railways. But he took this one policy decision that struck at the very foundation of the caste system. So in those days, train journeys were much longer. There was no bottled water available, no Bisleri. ACs were unheard of. So people were deployed at every railway station by the government to serve water to the passengers. They were called Pani Pandas. And as the name suggests, they were very visibly Brahmin, with tilaks and tikas and their janeyu, so as to reassure the public that they would not get polluted on drinking water by them. Babuji, in one move, reserved that entire position of Pani Pandas for Dalits, mainly from the Valmiki caste. And there was an uproar in the country. But of course, no one could protest because they would sound so casteist. And thereafter, all the Pani Pandas were Dalits, and people, if they wanted, they could drink the water from their hands, or well, they could just suffer in the heat. So the stories and the contributions and of not just Babuji, but of I think every icon which is mentioned in the book are so immense, so unique that I think we can go on endlessly talking about them and debating them and actually making people realize what an important contribution they have made to the country. But I think my time is up, so start with the discussion now, Niranjan. Thank you so much. Once again, I would like to thank Sudarshan and Guru for a wonderful book and to Observer Research Foundation for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you again connected. This entire volume with Babu Jagjivan Ram's life and legacy and his contribution, and so nicely actually you connect and fill the dots. Actually, that also gives a kind of picture that unfortunately not many people of our generation even remember the kind of contribution of Babu Jagjivan Ram, his role in that Bangladesh, creation of Bangladesh in 1971 war, which made India a different country. I think a lot of these things are not spoken and we hardly know actually. So in a sense, what you said, it signifies, and this volume in many ways actually fills that gap, bringing a lot of those tits and bits to the public knowledge. I think in that sense, it begins a kind of a conversation which is much needed. In fact, it should have started many decades ago.
Many years ago.
But nothing late in actually. We better start now than wait for some mercy or some big case or come and start. So it I think in many way this is a truly subaltern kind of I would say neo subaltern kind of beginning than what we saw actually in those volumes. 8-9 volumes. There was not a mention of a single Dalit icon. I don't see Lalita ji. I think we probably are missing her, and then I think we'll continue the conversation because I think their audience participants are already shooting their questions, and those who still want to ask questions, please actually you can see a chat box in your window, and please write the questions, and we are able to see that, and we'll actually those questions can be either targeted to certain panelist or the author, or to anyone you think, or it could be general. So now I have actually bunch of interesting questions. I think posed to the author as well as the panelist. Interesting. I think first I'll ask this, put this question to the authors, the very interesting question, because as I said in the beginning, writing a sort of volume of this nature, where you struggle with the facts and evidence, and in many ways a lot of these things are actually spoken by the people and passed from up to one generation to other. So the question someone has raised is that what roadblocks you faced related to the resource for this book. Can you actually throw some light? And then the related question is also about how do you, especially women, while researching, view what sort of in you picked up so many women, sort of leaders and reformers and these things. So the question is actually how they have able to break those sort of barriers and those sort of obstacles, and have gone into the prominence. Can you actually probably highlight a couple of those examples so that readers can get a sense? So Guru or Sudarshan, one of you actually can start first.
I'll take the question on the roadblocks. Certainly, I think large part of resources were oral history, but certainly in Nehru Memorial and Museum Library and National Archives, and obviously Babu Jagjivan Ram National Foundation, like it is a researcher's curiosity, it is his enthusiasm and excitement which actually leads him or her to the destination. So as far as the established personalities were concerned, there were resources, but then we faced a huge amount of challenge when researching about someone like Rani Jhalkaribai. We know a lot about Rani Lakshmibai, and literature, like reams of literature have been written about. Obviously, I mean, the contributions has been immense, and the literature and recognition is also there, but very little. I mean, in vernacular language, in the vernacular press, they were there. Some of the letters, some of the correspondences, but not actual concrete academic work. So we did some field work, in the sense getting down to Gwalior, which was her place of birth, and trying to speak with professors at the state university over there. And are there any living family members from the Jhalkaribai clan? So yes, I mean it was a challenge, but like I said, this is as of now an elementary work, as as freshers that we have started, and we have not, and because of the lack of material, we were not able to delve deeper into the sort of detailed struggle they faced as an everyday discrimination, and what were their actual journey and trajectory they actually traversed. So certainly I agree with the question that there were roadblocks, but I think if you are well intentioned, if you are determined, you will get resources, you will get people, you will get part of oral history. Niranjan ji.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think just to complement what Guru said, in fact, when we wrote the chapter on Babu Jagjivan Ram, even though it was a contemporary chapter, we sort of sought Swati ma'am and Veera ma'am's views and took their inputs into consideration when we wrote. If you take a personality like Soyarabai, there are just two books today. One is actually a biography of Chokamela, from which you can get some details. One is, I think, called Women Saints of India, where she has been mentioned. So there are just two books on her where we could possibly cull out. But from this to etch out a chapter is a challenge. But we felt, like Professor Rao said, we hear so much about, Chokamela. Yes, absolutely critical for the Bhakti movement today. But why not? And that connects to your next question. these are, like Lalita ma'am pointed out, their support systems let them be. Today, whenever we get the opportunity to interact with Meera Kumar ma'am, who we have written about in the book, we had invited her for a seminar to expound about Babuji's role in the 1971 India-Pakistan war. And whenever we get the chance to invite or rather speak to her, it shows how much the support system has let her be and express herself. And this is the key to almost all women folk we have covered in this anthology. You look at Dakshayani Velayudhan, despite the atrocities faced, there was a very good support system. You look at Soyarabai, she was not allowed to visit Pandharpur temple, yet she stuck to her instincts of educating her son Karma Mela, with, for instance, not getting him affected by some of the atrocities that their family was facing. You look at Jhalkaribai. These were critical chapters that we were dealing with, but all these women had tremendous support system. You look at Savitribai Phule, Jyotiba Phule, after marriage, they actually stayed apart, and they had this understanding that they move forward with their pursuits. That was their understanding. So the one-line answer to that is their support systems enabled them to live and express themselves freely, which we can notice in contemporary personalities of today. We look at Meera ma'am, we look at various other people we have written about in the conclusion. So that is the answer to the question of women-led empowerment. We've also focused, if you look at an Ayyankali, at his time, the Pulaya women were not allowed to wear clothing to cover their upper part of the body. And he fought that. And Dakshayani Velayudhan took forward that fight in a way also. So there's a lot of interconnectedness that way. So we've also focused on people who fought for women-led empowerment, and we have focused on women who had great support system who ensured women-led empowerment.
I think very well put. There is another question, very interesting question for both the authors, that this is an excellent excellent contribution to the gap that we had, especially on bringing Dalit icons and many of those social reformers, and this while this is actually a beginning. The question is that what is your next endeavor to keep the momentum and the discourse ongoing? So somebody wants to know about your plan and how to move this forward, actually.
Guru,
you can go, okay. And then Guru can join.
I think we have received a lot of suggestions with respect to the additions we can make to the personalities that can be covered. Like we are in a democratic tradition of reading, so there would be suggestions that you can add him, her, etc. So we want to perhaps explore that. And one other thread which we have been discussing is each of these personalities. You take a Jogendranath Mandal, there is not one comprehensive biography on him. There is one on Bengali language that came out, but in order to showcase his life, perhaps there's not one. So maybe look at deep diving into some of these aspects, and also take forward this to focus on our tribal brethren, because India's tribal Adivasis also have a great contribution to the making of our civilization. So we'd like to explore. These are some ideas, these are some discussions we are having, but nothing is final. Yeah, Guru, you want to answer that? The question was, what are some of the future ideas that we have?
No, certainly. I think one of the biggest import of this work is also about the contemporary relevance of Dalit issues. So it would not be a justice to the world of Dalit literature, to the world of Dalit issues, if we don't speak about the concerns, the challenges, and the issues that are that chiefly dominating the Dalit discourse today. So, like I said, the present aspirations of the young Dalit, the aspirational Dalit, and I categorically like what Swati ji said, that this mainstream narrative about this story of victimhood, we must need to go beyond that. I mean, I'm not discounting at all. It is a matter of open secret. You cannot discount the sort of atrocities and the sort of exclusion that the community has faced over years and over centuries, and which is still happening in different nature and different practices. But the issues that are chiefly sort of dominating the Dalit discourse today, the issues of dignity, the issues of recognition, the issues of representation at crucial decision-making positions. Fine, affirmative action has had its journey, but affirmative action has given you representation at government enterprises, let's say bureaucracy in universities, but there are places like this one, think tanks, ORF, and other similar institutions which are in this job of thinking, on this brainstorming job. How do we sort of create some conversation around ensuring adequate social representation, adequate gender representation in an institution like ORF or other similar institution in like media, civil society, think tanks? So I think these are the issues which we are going to toy with in the near future, taking cue from the lives and the times of our icons who continue to inspire us, and obviously would come out with some real actionable points and academic work as well on this, Niranjanji.
I think just one point. There could be a question that you guys are always speaking about history. How is it relevant today? I think what we are trying to drive home is it is important for India to put into letter and spirit the practice of social democracy. What is social democracy? Living liberty, equality, fraternity, and justice every single day. And that is why we are trying to recall and retell history again and again and again, so that they become part of our popular culture, so that today we can proudly say that yes, when we celebrate 75 years of independence in 2022, or when we celebrate 100 years of independence in 2047, India is able to exhibit social democracy, what Baba Sahib Ambedkar said, in letter and spirit.
Absolutely. I think what Guru said and what you also added, I mean, history, definitely we are bringing, those unsung heroes, heroines, and to the public knowledge, and, and also bringing their work, the kind of contribution to the popular, making it, entire, gamut of, treatment to the history much more inclusive and much more plural, and that's rightly so. I think what you also added, Guru, also about the thing that is happening today, the contemporary relevance. We should not actually look at Dalit advancement, just merely to affirmative actions. The provision that you have political and jobs, and then in education and all that. It is about what exactly you said about Sudarshan, about social democracy. Much has happened on about political democracy. What social democracy is where actually we are stuck as a country, as a nation, and in 75 years journey, I think that hasn't actually made much progress. If you look at in terms of the way, different social groups are being represented not nominally, by just constitutional provision, but in real sense of representation, where they would have a voice, and they would have a sort of strength on their own. They would have agency. They would have actually a sort of presence that other would respect, not just concede and accede, saying that okay, they've been given some sort of a legal right or the thing. Now we have to just tolerate or bear. That sort of attitude has to change, and that would change actually if you have a sort of free frank conversation, and you also bring a lot of these issues to the table. I think you are creating a kind of narrative through those personalities. I think as a sort of academician, as a public policy sort of a researcher, I would jump and probably take sort of this opportunity to suggest that why not get a number of Dalit icons who have made their mark even in many ways, like in the bureaucracy, like
Right.
you look at in the media, you look at many other medium where actually they nobody actually talks about their contribution. Many of those activists even today are fighting doggedly about you look at the people who are fighting for the scavengers,
Yeah.
those who actually do such dehumanizing practice, and they're the people like Wilson and other who have spent their
Yeah.
entire life actually in it. So I think many of those heroes actually in fact probably could be your probably next target. I mean, I should not be saying you must be already having them, but I think now I think I'd request both Professor Chinarao and Swati Kumar, both of you also spend a couple of minutes probably to reflect and based on this question and some of the next thing that they are planning. I think in many way you would have also seen that there could be lot many things actually that can be brought in, and this volume can expand further actually to to probably create far more probably a wider horizon in terms of personality, in terms of the issues related to Dalit. So I think I'll first request Professor Chinarao to reflect something and probably put his thought on this.
No, in fact, the the reflection, when the state decides that what to read, who will read, and unless and until that situation comes in. For instance, look at now UGC established 32 the departments to study social exclusion and inclusive policy established by the UGC, and they do not have a JRF net exam in exclusion studies. They have to prepare a curriculum to have a net exam so that the subject gains momentum. Only then the master level programs can be started. So similarly, unless and until these makers of Dalit history, these icons, unless and until you made them into a curriculum, they will not be a necessity to read or research. So that needs to be developed, particularly since some of you are in the decision making and near to the organizers of officials of these institutions, which makes these decisions. Not me as a simple small department university professor cannot make such decision making decisions. And as far as, because how do the Dalit studies developed? For partly the introduction of Rajiv Gandhi fellowships, for instance, which encourage the young researchers to enter into the research institutions. The Rajiv Gandhi fellowships that I'm talking about at one point of time, I do not know whether it is now continued or not. So similarly, because not many of them are able to take up this research at the higher education level, because they don't have the incentives. Either you have this UGC JRF scholarships or other state provided ones. So unless and until the either maybe Babu Jagjivan Ram Foundation can introduce some scholarships or fellowships to develop the studies on Babu Jagjivan Ram on various aspects, like military history, since he was a defense minister, social history, as he was Dalit, a big great icon. So whatever the fields that he has and excelled or worked, or in those fields, if you encourage that some scholarships and all, like, I think new research would be which we can expect. So these are the things that some of them, and it's because, for instance, in the Indian History Congress, last 5 years, I've been running a special panel on Dalit history and politics in Indian History Congress. So the first session that we had at Kerala in Trivandrum 2016. So in fact, the initiation before that was I was working on a volume called Past of the Outcast, which was published by Warren Blackswan in 2017. I worked with Professor Sabyasachi Bhattacharya, who's no more. So that the critical introduction or my what you call comments on mainstream historians' apathy towards Dalit history. So when I criticized, then he said that how long we criticize, I think it's a high time for you to start a panel. So right under the nose of Indian Historians Association, it's called Indian History Congress, where I started a panel called Special Panel on Dalit History and Politics, which has been continuing. In the first volume is taken up by the Warren Blackswan. Anytime it will come. The second volume we thought of on Dalit intellectuals. Then it is quite very difficult to find out, the people to write on each Dalit intellectual. Finally, we managed to get 15 chapters, which has taken up only a few days back. I signed with an agreement with the Primus publication that will come anytime, maybe a couple of months. So in another volume we had with Dalit's experience in Indian religious traditions. So similarly, these are the things. If we get good now to have a conference or to get an article from an expert in the field, funding is the most important part. So that who would be funding for the Dalit panel? It's very difficult. And to expect the expert to travel to the conference and stay there and write 25-30 pages of a good research paper, and we don't have funding, and many of the funding agencies of late at least decline me that they don't fund such kind of conferences. So this is the most important part. And maybe whatever the foundations that you people are working and you people are familiar with, if you could encourage such kind of thing, similarly these things can be developed. And this is my humble request to all the panelists and the authors too. And great congratulations for a brilliant attempt to both the authors.
Wonderful, and thanks so much for flagging up, your work and what you are actually, in the process of, bringing out. I think these are, very, very timely and much needed. Of course, in academic we all face this. Funding is the main, hurdle. You have a lot of ideas and many things can actually happen, but because of the funding constraint, a lot actually. You keep on postponing, and in many cases we actually produce a lot of time work actually pure sacrifice, of some of the fellow researcher and colleagues. But I think Guru Prakash being the place where actually, funding access to funding becomes a little easier. I think this is one area. I think Dalit history, and scholarship requires really a lot of funding and a lot of those sort of financial encouragement. I think the whole body of work that came in last few years was largely because of UGC setting up several centers on social exclusion and then funding liberally those planning commission which for those 5 years I remember, and probably we actually it's high time that government at the center at least can give it a further push actually, probably with a new sort of way. So now I will not actually take much time, but now I'll request Swati ji to put her thought also, what she's heard and saw the kind of entire deliberation, and she can also reflect on how far actually we need to move further and in which direction. Yeah, please.
So first, I would actually like to, reply to Professor Rao, and I agree with you entirely, sir, that this needs funding, and until Dalit history is a part of mainstream curriculum, people will not read it or will not actually look at it. And the foundation actually is in talks with a number of universities, including JNU, for setting up a chair and for the functioning of a chair. So I think that should come through. Plus, it does give funds for organizing the kind of conferences you're talking about. So these are there. Of course, that they have limits and conditions, but they are very much there. So it is available. What I really want to say about this book and how to take it forward is that I think it's the first step to owning the narrative. I mean, so much has been written about Dalit, so much has been written about the caste system, so much has been written about Dalit icons, but I think owning the narrative from the point of view of someone who is from the community or is empathetic to the community is what is important and what is required. That's when you don't get people only one-sided view of, say, a victimhood or a charity of reservation. You don't get that kind of thing. You get the holistic picture, and you actually realize the kind of contribution this community has made to the country. I mean, otherwise people just think of it as something. It's like some kind of a appendage which one is carrying along through reservation. That is not true. They have made an immense contribution. It's incredible what they have contributed to. But unless we own that narrative, and I think this book is an amazing start to it, and there should be more starts, that message will not go out, not only to people of other castes, but to the community themselves. They should also feel empowered and say, yes, this is it. And that's the kind of empowerment I'm actually seeing now in a lot of young people when they're taking on their names, when they're taking on their, the small acts of rebellion. So I think this is a very promising start, and it will be taken forward because the voice is coming from the people itself. It's organic. Yeah.
Thank you.
If it's a concluding remark, I also want to say thank you actually to the Research Foundation for inviting me, and Sudarshan and Guru Prakash. Once again, brilliant piece of work, great research. Just take it forward.
Thank you so much.
And you said it so passionately, especially, addressing those funding part and, the idea of a chair in different universities, I think on Dalit studies would be a great idea. In fact, I've been talking to a lot of people about, setting up and starting a chair on democracy in different places. We are the largest democracy. Unfortunately, you won't find in any of our leading universities a chair on democracy. That's if you put it in. So in terms of Dalit history, the way what you said correctly, owning the narratives and the way both of them have courageously tried to mainstream, bringing those icons to the mainstream debate, mainstream sort of discourse, because they have been missing for years and I would say centuries. So in a sense, this is a very good, I would say, modest attempt, and they have a plan. They have sort of a pathway how to move forward. But the best part is that this is already generating a lot of interest, and it is also creating sort of buzz. I think we'll see a new generation of scholars who are actually, today fortunately we have a sort of thanks to the way knowledge system has exploded through internet and many other mediums. I think we have a generation of scholars who are braving to explore to many areas which have been unexplored, and so this is probably like throwing to them certain sort of a that this could be yours, and why don't you actually do your PhD on a particular icon? Icon completely lost it. So I think funding part is definitely important, but I think by writing, by popularizing, by debating, and creating a spark, I think can actually do a long way. Actually, I think people are looking for ideas, and people are really hunting for those sort of themes in which they want to explore. So I think in that sense, this would be a sort of a very, very I would say timely contribution. And before we close, I think I want to give at least 1 minute each to both the author, at least to say their last words before we close. So I'll start with Sudarshan first.
I think the panel has been overwhelming for us. And, when we started, we didn't even think we will write a book. We just started writing articles together. When we noticed organic, positive response, and I'm not going to subtract them and say someone from the right liked it, someone from the left liked it, someone from the center liked it. There was organic, positive response from everywhere. And that really prompted us to come this far. And like Guru has been pointing out, it's a humble attempt, it's a modest attempt, but we want to carry forward relaying these stories. And even if we contribute our bit to this, I think we would have done our job. We want to do that, but importantly, keep taking contemporary life lessons from them. That's how we can define India of 21st century.
No, certainly, and I think the concerns raised by Professor Rao, I've taken a note of it, and there are efforts. I think right in the heart of capital, we now have Dr. Ambedkar International Center, just for the purpose of supporting and encouraging scholarship on Ambedkar studies as well. But we would be failing in our duties if we fail to acknowledge Professor Harsh Pant here, who was actually instrumental. And I think in the entire history of ORF, which is good 30 years history, this was the first time that ORF is discussing on Dalit issue. So that is also a sort of achievement. So grateful to you, Niranjan Sahuji, for having us over here and initiating this discussion. Like we said, it is just a start. The conversation has just started, and we definitely intend to take it forward both in academic and in action as well. I would just request all of you to for a picture, a digital. Amber, I hope you are taking a picture.
Amber always does his job.
Amber must be doing, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great. I think this has been really. I think we have spent more than 1 hour 40 minutes. I think, and how the time went actually, even I didn't realize. And in fact, unfortunately, we have several questions. We couldn't actually really take up because of lack of time. There are a lot of questions about the subaltern history, about the oral history and its relevance, and those things. I think I'll pass on to both the author for their consideration, because they are also asking how the methodological things can be rectified in the next volume, and how probably oral history can be presented in a far more robust way. I think so. There are a lot of legitimate suggestions. So I'll pass them. But I think overall this has been a great sort of a discussion, and I thank all the panelists for taking their time, and Swati ji, Professor Rao, and then of course we missed really Lalita ji, because she had really started the flow, and picking up those interesting anecdotes. We really missed her, but unfortunately, what else we can do? And before we close, I think I want to thank obviously, of course, Harsh Pant for initiating this, and then my colleague Amber Ghosh from Calcutta has been coordinating it since last 15 days tirelessly, and our entire IT team, Karan Kumar, and many of those have been supporting very, very efficiently to make this happen. And as Guru said that we have actually made a very, very interesting mark in terms of debating this issue, which ORF does in different ways, but not so often. We are actually noting it, and we'll make it a point that not only we'll do a major event, hopefully an open event, not through online when next volume comes, but I think on larger issues of especially social democracy, because I actually lead the program on democracy, and I have my special interest in affirmative action and social democracy part. So I've been actually writing on some of those issues. So I think I'll definitely have opportunity to bring you and some of your thing that you have been writing and debating again, and we'll definitely have many more sessions on different aspects of the journey that you have made. And all the best, and hoping this book will be a great success. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.